Hi, this is Peter Martin from Transcona, and I'm delighted to be here with Murray Rougeau of Transcona for our first podcast, and we call it Transcona Then, Transcona Now, and Transcona Beyond. Is that right, Murray?
It is, Peter. That's trying to get everything in a nutshell, the progress we've made in Transcona from the early years till present.
Now, at the beginning of our segment, every time we're going to have a whistle blowing, and that whistle is significant to Transcona. Murray, you want to talk about that whistle?
Well, that whistle was used at the CNR shops, and it would be used at 8 o'clock in the morning to get all the employees to their workstations, and then at noon it would blow, and that was their lunch hour, and then at 4 in the afternoon, or I'll say 5, it would blow again, and that was the end of the shifts. That whistle was also used to if there was ever a fire or emergency in the shop itself, it would be blowing constantly, and that would summon the volunteers for the volunteer fire department that the CNR actually had of their own, and they would attend to any small fires. There was instance where the volunteer fire group from Transcona would also attend these fires. The majority of the firefighters were
Oh, right.
Yeah. So, anyways, they even had their own fire station on them on the main drag in the CNR in the Transcona shop.
Oh yeah. I know. I remember being at home and the whistle would blow, and my mom would know Dad's coming home.
Yeah.
She'd make sure she got supper ready because he's on his way home. So the whistle was kind of a wake-up call for the housewives to make sure the meal's prepared and everything. It was like those old days.
That's right. And also another little sideline of that is that whistle apparently was built by the same company that built the Titanic. It's the sister whistle of the whistle that was on the Titanic. So that's quite a...
Did you know that? Did you? I didn't know that. No.
I didn't know it, but apparently I did some research, and yes, it's built by the same company.
That's fantastic. We never hear that blow, but and when we did the Centennial, Murray and I ran the Centennial event for Transcona in 2012. We actually arranged with CNR to do a fix-around because the steam was in there, but they actually did air to make the whistle blow again just for our Centennial. And I remember that, and a lot of people were excited.
Well, we had the opening ceremonies in the Transcona Legion parking lot, and we all stood there. There's about 200 people or so, and we all stood there. And Peter told everyone, "Okay, get ready. We're gonna hear the whistle." And we're all standing there, and countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here it comes. Oh, wait a minute, there's no sound. Peter looks around, he says, "Oh, only dogs will be able to hear this whistle." Just jokingly, and then the next thing you know, we heard it.
Most people worked there, so it was really, everybody was connected, and the whistle was very important. So that's why we have the whistle playing at the start and the end of every one of our podcasts as a reminder of what it sounded like.
I guess after spending 80 years in Transcona, I feel that I can contribute to this podcast about Transcona. Some of my memories and everything, probably no one even is aware of some of the buildings and businesses that have been in Transcona, so it gives me the opportunity to pass this on.
And why do it, Murray? Like, we know what this stuff is. Why is it important in your mind to let others know, especially some of the newer people who are living in Transcona these days?
Well, I think it all depends, or I guess I better rephrase that. It's just that you see the young kids hanging around McDonald's and Tim Hortons, and you just wonder, do they know or do they even care about Transcona? I know when we were younger, we had seniors that would sit down, talk with us, and we would know different things that were going on, and I just want to make sure that they know the history of Transcona. You never know, they might end up living here as long as I have.
So what if someone say, well, I don't care where I live, I don't care anything about the town, I just bought a house, I'll go to school, we'll stay in our own place in the weekend, we won't go through with it out Transcona, we just don't care. How do we change their mind and get them excited like we are about Transcona?
Well, I guess it's just a matter of trying to get the word out to the different groups. Like you're involved with the Legion and all the Remembrance Day ceremonies, and just making people aware of what where the history of Transcona is, and maybe we'll convert some people, and they will convert other people. I know a good example of that is the 2747, the steam engine that we've worked on in the park, and I've been working there, and a young mother has come up with 2 or 3 kids, and she said, she has mentioned, oh, this is just wonderful. My little boy, he comes here every day. He just loves that steam engine. And I just happened to run into this one lady, and I said, well, do you know the history of this engine? And she said, well, not really. And I says, well, this is the first steam engine that was built in Transcona. And almost everybody in Transcona had a part of building these engines, and oh, I didn't know that, and so she said, I'm going to tell my husband when I get back about this, and so it's just a matter of getting the word out there, and the 2747 project is probably a good stepping stone for us.
And that's a good point, Murray, because when you run into people, you're a good tour guide to Transcona, and people get excited when somebody shares a history. And so what we're doing with this podcast is the same thing. We're sharing a history to hopefully a whole bunch at the same time.
Exactly.
And maybe we'll come up with some interesting things about Transcona that they weren't aware. Where was the fire department in Transcona? Where was it located?
Well,
you know the answer to that.
Well, that's right. The fire department was at one time, just up to about 1970, Transcona started their own fire department. It was, before that, it was a combination of the Transcona Police and the CNR volunteers that were firefighters in Transcona. And then with Transcona growing up so fast, spreading out, they decided to start their own fire department. And fortunately, I was the third full-time firefighter hired in Transcona. And from there, after amalgamation in 1974, we spread out. But it was 4 or 5 years we were just strictly Transcona Fire Department.
Isn't that fantastic? Now, who would have known that? I didn't know that. I know you went on to work many, many years with the Winnipeg Fire Department.
Yes, I did. I put in 39 years, retired district chief, and lots of memories, lots of good memories, lots of not so good memories, sad memories, but you get that when you're involved in that type of work. But anyways, the reason why I'm here, Peter, is to spread the memories that I have and maybe surprise a lot of people about what was actually in Transcona years ago. Buildings and old businesses that were around it are now gone. But, I can give you many examples.
Exactly. Yeah. And unfortunately, we've lost some people. Like Bill Blaikie would have been a great one to interview because he's got some history too. But there's still some folks alive today that have a lot of interesting stories and remember things about Transcona that we hope to interview so we can capture their memories before it's too late.
Yeah, and that was our whole...
So we talk about Transcona, and it's important to talk about like where it came from. It was just field. It was just a farmer's field way back, right, Murray?
Well, actually, Peter, you know what? There is a rumor that Transcona originally started in South Transcona, and the problems with the flooding and everything, they decided to move the town across the main line of the CNR and open it up, and where we are now.
Oh, really? Okay, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But it was about what, 1908 or something that.
1908, they decided to build a shop in where it is now. Yeah.
How many acres of land did they have at that time?
Was it 800 acres? 800 acres.
800 acres of land.
Yeah.
So basically, it was field gumbo, and they decided to build it because this was a good spot for the CNR. They wanted a sort of a center of Canada.
Yeah, and there's so many things that I can remember back when the CNR shop was active and they had all the engines running out of there. They had piles of coal that went down Pandora Avenue, and the coal went from about Oxford Street, which is now Day. It went from Day all the way down to as far as the East End Community Club. and these were huge piles of coal, stretched for blocks and blocks, and probably a height of maybe probably 35 feet high.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. And that was for the steam engines.
They had to load that up.
And I used to walk on there.
Gee, I wonder where they got their coal from. There must be the
Yeah,
coal mines from somewhere.
Yeah, they brought it in there. Yeah.
Interesting. And now you don't worry about that.
Nope.
Yeah.
No.
So that was in Transcona that got built. Then that actually, the construction of the shops brought a lot of people to Transcona from all over the world looking for jobs.
Yeah.
And my grandparents came in 1907 from Dauphin. They were homesteading, and they heard about the CNR shops. He was a cabinet maker. He said, "I'm going to go and work there." So a lot came to Transcona and made it home. So we're a mixed bag in Transcona,
Yeah.
people from all over the world, and everybody got along because the common goal was CNR, working at the CNR. And speaking of Bill Blaikie, Maria, I was High Neighbor Sam for many years, as you well know, and I had an opportunity to interview Bill Blaikie way back in 2012. And I've taken some of his responses to my questions, and I'm adding it today because we're talking about Bill and what he knew about Transcona, what he experienced, and what he gave to his community. And I thought it would be appropriate to add some of his responses to our podcast, because here's a guy who has a history in Transcona. His family and Taylor family were connected, and they have 90 years of history. So here's a couple of things that Bill said that I've put into our podcast today.
Born like a lot of people in Transcona. I was born at St. Boniface Hospital, but I always say I had a real Transcona birth in the sense that I was delivered by Dr. Murdoch McKay, that the school's named after. So, like a lot of people of that era, although I think my mother was delivered by Dr. McKay too. So he was around for a long time. He saw a couple of generations of Transconians come forward. So. The Transcona News Carrie, that was my first job when Transcona News used to be down on Victoria there, and we used to line up and watch the printing presses. The papers were literally hot off the press those days, and we'd fill our canvas bags and head off into the snow in the winter and deliver those papers. Well, I think what made Transcona special was, for one thing, the smallness of the community. When I was growing up, it was 4,000, 5,000, 9,000. I mean, now it's 40, 45, who knows? And the fact that so many of our parents, in particular our fathers, worked together in the same place, there was a unity in that, and a closeness that I certainly look back on fondly. And if you didn't work for the CNR, you probably worked for the town, certainly, because that was also the case with me on my mother's side, that my grandfather was actually the chief of police in Transcona when I was born. Alec Taylor, there's a street named after him, Alec Taylor Drive, in the east end of Transcona. So we can't all be politicians. There's many ways to serve your communities. There are community clubs out there, and service clubs, and churches, and other organizations that need volunteers. It's harder in the way life is organized these days for people to do that, I know, but I think that's one of the things that's always made in Transcona when I was born. Alec Taylor, there's a street named after him, Alec Taylor Drive, in the east end of Transcona. So the Blaikies and or the Taylors we've been here for 90 out of the 100 years, and so I always felt like Transcona was a very special place. I was made to feel that way through my family, and it's a feeling that has never left me. Going to a special place, and I would hope that people would take up that torch and make sure that the next 100 years is just as special as the last 100.
Our whole idea, Peter, is to get these memories out there before it's too late. We're gone, we'll be gone, and we just want to see this carried over a bit. We don't want everything just to die at this.
Yeah, well, you're right, Murray, and it's up to us to do this because we feel obligated to share. And we'll be talking current events too. There's stuff now that our councillor and our MLAs are discussing or proposing for Transcona, like the fitness center, like the Tiny Homes for Heroes, the Kinsman Home for Heroes. We can share with them some of their thoughts on the subject. And
it'll be
current day as well as history, current day, and even stuff going forward.
Basically an information setup that we want to, old and new, get those new ideas out, like you say, from Councillor Wyatt, different things, and there are some boards that they're starting up that we could,
There's all kinds of things that we will talk about. We'll, people who know us can share some of their thoughts on ideas that we can talk about. But there's just so many interesting things that have happened in Transcona. Because as we said in the past too, everything you see around Transcona didn't just happen. It happened because people made it happen. People decided they were going to, create a cenotaph in downtown Transcona. Well, that doesn't just come about. People made it happen. Yeah. And there's so much. You think of things that.
Well, the East End Community Club. There was one man that worked. It was Mr. Golding there. He was the fellow that worked so hard to start a East End Community Club, and look what you have now. You have 3 rinks and beautiful indoor facilities and everything. That was all just the result of one person that started it.
See, and that's a good example, and we need to acknowledge and pay tribute to those people who had the foresight and the vision to go ahead with something that maybe they've had a lot of opposition to. Not everybody agreed with spending a lot of money on certain things and didn't see it, but some people persevered.
But the key thing, Peter, is it took volunteers to build these places. People come out and volunteer, make sandwiches for the workers that were putting up the trusses at the East End Community Club. Getting people involved. That's the key thing, volunteers. And we don't get the opportunity to see a lot of people that want to volunteer now, and it just assume that, okay, the city will put this up and that. But going back to the grassroots is what I think we're going to try and do here.
Well, we are a great volunteer committee. Like you and I, we co-chaired the Centennial for Transcona. Well, that would not have happened without all the massive volunteers that contributed their time, energy, and their thoughts and insights to making a very successful Centennial. Your homecoming. That was your idea with a few other people, but you made it happen, and this was the most wonderful thing that could never be repeated again, in my mind. Yeah. That made a lot of people happy, Murray. So I was glad to be part of that with you. But it was your idea with, I forget the names of the others who talked to you about it and made it happen. But
a couple of Transcona guys. Doug McDonald was one that actually planted the seed in my head. He lived out at the coast, but he said, wouldn't it be nice if we could get together again? And that get-together started off at maybe 20, 25, 50 people. Next thing you know, we're in hundreds of people that wanted to come. So it just snowballed. And
yeah, I chuckle because it started off, people who were born in the 50s and 60s. And then we added to 50s, 60s. How about the 70s?
Yeah.
Why don't we include some 80s people to start off as 30s, 40s, 50s? And then we gradually added, but it was a massive group. We had the old bands.
And you know, Peter, I remember one fella that came up to me, and everybody will recognize his name. It was Jim Goche. And Jim Goche said, Murray, this is the greatest thing that we've ever had in Transcona. If you ever have another one, please let me know. I give full support behind it. He just loved it. He couldn't talk enough about it. And everybody knows Jim Goche.
Yeah, that's a good example. It brought people together, and the whole weekend was people sharing stories and talking about the old days and talking about how they used to do this, used to do that. And one story that people may not know is the grandstand at Park Circle. You danced there at one time. Your twin sister danced.
My twin sister and I used to tap dance there, and my poor old grandfather, he played the violin. And Sunday afternoons in the park, people would come and I don't think they even had lawn chairs then, but they would come and put their blanket down on the ground, sit on the ground, and bring a little lunch, and we'd have entertainment, different groups, and that was something to look forward to on Sunday afternoons. Concert in the park in Transcona.
Exactly. So, Well, this is just this is our main kickoff to the podcast. We don't know where we're going to go with this. This is kind of our test version. I'm going to create something from this that we can test, but we're looking forward to having a regular, maybe once a month we'll have 30, 45 minutes, just having an informal discussion to talk, perhaps add some small interviews with people. We'll take our iPhone, go talk to Nell or go talk to somebody and add that into our conversation. But it's really about what we think is important about the history of Transcona and the people that made it happen, like volunteers, as Murray said. That's it. That's key. And they don't get recognized sometime. And in fact, volunteers get sick or something, they can't volunteer anymore, and we never hear from them again, and we forget about them.
Forget about them.
So we got to get the names of those people and say thank you for your service to the community. That's so important.
Yeah, something they can take to the, on their deathbed. Well, I better not.
Yeah, well, that's right.
But, it's just something they can be pleased that they did, and everybody likes to look back at what they've accomplished, and it's pass that on to their family.
Well, that's good. We'll add to this anyway. This is just the first of a few to start things off. So we'll add some information and see where it goes from here. But I think we're on the way to a success, Murray. So this is our very first test.
It's exciting.
Exciting. Yeah. Okay,
thanks,
so we'll stop now. About stuff, but one thing that came to mind is, and most people now see it, on Plessy Road, you see the 2747 engine, the first steam engine built in Western Canada. And this was something built right here in the Transcona shops. And it was acquired by the JCs, I believe, and they got it moved, actually drove it right into the park, parked it, and it sat for many, many years, since 1964, I think, till now. And it was deteriorating. It was rusting out, and the museum acquired it for $1 from the Winnipeg Railway Museum when they acquired it from the JCs, and we took it over, and we made a decision, and I'm on the museum board, Murray was as well, and we made a decision to protect the engine for future generations. So if you drive down Plessy, you see a big structure over the engine, and hopefully appreciate the fact that now it'll be available for future generations to see an engine that's protected. It won't be weathered as bad. We even have stairs going up to one side. Right, Murray? And why was that important to you that we protect the engine?
Well, Peter, like you mentioned, we actually had a fellow came from Montreal, and we paid him to do an assessment on that engine.
Right.
And he did the whole assessment and gave us some alarming news. He said that this engine might last another 10 years before it starts to totally disintegrate, fall apart, because it was rusting and so forth. And if we didn't make a move on it soon, there would be nothing to have. It would just be loaded up in a flatbed and taken to the scrapyard. So that's when I think you and I actually started that, Peter, when we realized the job that was ahead of us, it was going to be too much for us. And the fundraising and so forth. So that's when we went to the Transcona Museum, and with their aid and the volunteers that they have, we have one of the beautiful structures in Transcona, probably in all of, I would say, all of Canada, with covering an engine of that era. So
yes, sir.
It's beautiful at night, and even during the day, the landscaping that we're still working on, new sidewalk around it and so forth. It is just beautiful to look at, and the young generation, years to come, will look at it and remember steam engines.
Well, yeah, and that's right. It's preservation for future generations. You and I used to go on that engine. There's no gate around and no fence. I think it was wide open for years, and we played football in that field, just fun football, and we'd climb on the engine, and we never got hurt. We never thought about suing the city if we did.
No, that's right. Peter, it takes me back a few years when I ran the Transcona anti-graffiti campaign, and that engine used to get hit every once in a while, every weekend and nights and everything. There'd be graffiti put on it, and I'd go and spend time cleaning it off, and it was a constant battle, and things sure didn't look good at the time, but anyways, it has changed, turned around now. the access into that is pretty well, I won't say impossible, but it's the way it's been designed with the fence and so forth. It's alarm system in there now.
Yes.
It's I would say it's 90% safe of being vandalized.
Yeah, and that's another example where it was our museum board and our subcommittee, which you were on, meeting every week. We met every week through the last 2 years, preparing and negotiating. And Alana, the curator of the museum, worked hard in getting grants and coordinating the trades to sandblast, to weld, to paint. So we have a nice, pristine engine to cover. So kudos to the museum and especially the Alana Horechko, the curator, for coordinating. And because of COVID, we actually found more money than we expected, so we raised over $600,000, thanks to all the supporters of the community, and thanks to CN. And that's where Daniel Blaikie helped at least get somebody in CN to listen to us and acknowledge the fact this is important to protect important heritage items. So thank you to Daniel, who is, I understand, still leaving federal politics and moving to Manitoba politics. So we wish him. There's an example of a community coming together to raise money for something that we feel is important for future generations. Because if this falls apart, you cannot rebuild it. It's gone. So this is our contribution to the future. So yeah, I agree with that. Right. This segment, we're talking a bit about a few things in Transcona that people may not be aware of. And one thing I can think of, Murray, is the bioreserve. We've been on the trail, and we see the sign bioreserve, and it's an interesting walk. But there's some history between the bioreserve. So tell me your take, what you remember about the bioreserve itself, Murray.
Okay, Peter, thanks for that. The bioreserve actually started years ago. It was a place where they used to coat railway ties. It was called the creosote plant, and the railway ties would be coated with this creosote oil, and would preserve the ties for years. And that was fine. There was probably maybe 50 or 100 men who worked there at the time. But then over time, they realized that they were covering the tiles with stuff that shouldn't be breathed or shouldn't even be on the ground. So that's when they decided to shut down the creosote plant and revert to cement ties. And
it was dangerous. Whether the creosote ended up being dangerous.
It was.
You find out years later, certain things are dangerous, and at the time we're practically eating the stuff, and as no, it'll kill you.
Yeah, and then they.
Yeah.
And also another thing with this creosote, it just doesn't wash away. It's in the ground, and it's there probably forever. So what they decided to do was, well, actually, the creosote plant itself burned down in 1974. I was actually working on the Winnipeg Fire Department there, and we actually battled the fire that night when the creosote plant burned down. But after that, that whole area was out of bounds, and then they decided they went after the company that owned the land and everything, and they decided they were going to get rid of all the contaminated soil and bury it in the same location. And that's where, if you see, there's a hill on the east side of the bioreserve now. That hill is actually a big rubber covering that's covered all the soil that was contaminated, and it's supposed to be there. It will be there for over 100 years. That's the warranty on the rubber cell that's covering this contaminated soil. And I don't know what's going to happen after 100 years. I guess we won't have to worry about it too much. But anyways, that's a little bit of history about the bioreserve. It was a real mess when they had to clean it up. They had to move houses that were bordering on the land there. They actually moved houses and lifted basements, and yeah, it was a real undertaking. But you go in there now and you would never know what was actually there and what transpired over the years here in Transcona.
Yeah, that's good history. Thanks, Murray, for that. That's a good history. I didn't know half of that stuff. I had heard that some of the houses had some issues with the basement. They had to make sure they took away most of the soil before they built the basement, so it wouldn't leak into their material in the basement and their such in their yard. So it's interesting. Our bioreserve is so nice, and we don't appreciate the history sometimes. We just use it. So thanks for that little bit of information, Murray. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Peter.
I was raised on Madeline Avenue. My father got a wartime home when he came back from the war, and it was a house, corner of Madeline and Whittier, and it had no basement. So he lifted the house and poured himself a basement. I remember he built a conveyor belt to haul dirt, and he'd come home from work, and we had hauled dirt out of the basement, and made himself a basement. And then, so the west end of Transcona was kind of my territory. And I remember on Plessy here, there's a big plant owned by, I can't remember the name, it was a BACM plant. I can't remember the name of the developer who owned this. It's a well-known name. But he owned it, and he had a yard, he had all kinds of machines out here, and gravel and such. BACM, and then we used to play as kids across the road, across from where Transcona Boulevard is. And now, where the BACM plant is, it became city yards. And then now, I'm actually living here. So I moved from where I was living in Madeline, and we moved to Kildare and then Blue Ridge Bay, and now we're living in Park City Commons. So when I look at this area with all the buildings and stores, I'm thinking, we used to hang around here. There's a lot of stuff going on, and people don't remember that, don't realize what really went on here in those days. Do you remember, Murray, the area here?
Yeah, the area, Peter, actually was kind of a eyesore for the western part of Transcona. You're right, it was BACM. They were a huge construction company, built roads and probably built half the streets in Transcona. And then I guess it was probably in the late 70s, mid 80s, they decided they were going to move their location to further east Transcona, well, in Springfield. And the city of Winnipeg bought the land and all the buildings, and it became the city of Winnipeg Workyards. And then they did the repairs on all the vehicles, and they would have storage sand piles for the roads in the wintertime and stuff like that. And it was actually a real eyesore at that point because everything was sort of run down and everything. And lo and behold, our city councilor at the time, he was the one that actually got the ball rolling and decided that this whole area was going to be changed into what you see now with the apartment blocks and the shopping center, shopping mall. And no one ever thought it was going to happen, but lo and behold, the next thing you know, the buildings were smashed down, and the city actually built a new works yard over in the Elmwood area, and that opened the door for this area, and now you see what we have here, and a real transition from what we had to what it is now.
Yeah, and you're right, Murray, that you mentioned the council did that kind of stuff. Everything you see in Transcona didn't just happen. All the development didn't just happen. It required politicians and other people to come up with a vision, an idea, and actually ideas not even good on their own. Ideas need somebody to implement the ideas and make it happen. So when I remember the time on Councilor Wyatt told us about the changes on Ravels, and I remember we had a meeting with the Toronto Playground Renewal Association. And he said, "Oh, that's going to look completely different. We're going to close off Ravels. We're going to do this, do that." And I couldn't see the vision until now. Now I see it. But he had that. Before we even see any development, any plows on the street or machines, it's on paper. This is how it's going to happen, and he got to see that, and lo and behold, it did happen as he planned. But he could see that as a very important development for Transcona. Now we're in a beautiful apartment, and we got stores close by, but it would never have happened without all the politicians and others getting involved.
Yeah, you're right, Peter. He was a real visionary, or is a real visionary, and there's so many things that we could talk about, this being one of them. But as we're sitting here discussing this, I have another thought in mind about our beautiful swimming pool that we have.
Oh, yeah.
A splash pad, or not a splash pad, but
Yeah, splash pad and pool.
Splash pad and pool, and the water slide.
Water slide, yeah.
Water slide, and that also was his idea that he went after, and lo and behold, we have kids coming from all over the city, St. James, for even further than that, lined up, waiting to get into this location. So yeah, but we'll talk about that in another time.
Yeah, in another podcast.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
okay, let's start this from here. Our very first podcast, and it's kind of, we're winging it. Me and Murray aren't experts on this stuff. We just know what we like, and it's Transcona, and we're hopefully putting some interesting things in our podcast that some of you might be able to relate to. Many people who know us can send us a private message asking for certain topics to be covered or asking questions that we can cover, but we're just kind of winging this first podcast. We hope we get enough followers who like it that we'll keep generating one a month. And not long. We'll do 30-minute podcasts is plenty, perhaps. It's just to give you things that are going on now and in present day, in the past, and into the future, things we anticipate. So how do you see it unfolding, Murray, for us going forward on this podcast?
Well, it's kind of exciting to be doing part of this. You and I have talked about, educating the people in Transcona about exactly the history of what's transpired in Transcona. I know in my thoughts, I wanted to talk about the original Transcona Fire Department, and then the police department that Transcona had of its own. There's so many different items that I can think of that I want to relay to,
So
in
future
these
topic,
different in these different podcasts, and just to keep track of what went on if anybody's interested in it. But there's so many stories out there, and as I'm talking, there's more stories coming to my mind about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
Well,
yeah, it's exciting.
It's exciting,
yeah.
and we'll probably interview the odd person. Take
Yeah.
our iPhone there and say, tell us about your thoughts on Transcona. There's so many interesting people who are alive today, who are aged and older. But I just think Border Chemical there, that building that's behind Border Chemical. There's an old building there that man said that you and I can go and take a tour of.
Yeah, it's still there, Peter, and it was.
Oh.
I don't know the whole history of it, but was it a storage facility or what were they?
It's over 100 years old.
Yeah, it's over 100 years old. It's still.
It's older than we are, I think, aren't we? Yeah, close to it. Close to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, close. But that's just an example. We get excited about stuff. We're rambling a bit, but there's so many things that the topics are really limitless. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. We're trying to cover as many things as possible. And it's really about people in Transcona who may be raised in Transcona, lived throughout their life, who may learn things that they didn't realize, and even for new people in the Transcona. We welcome, the Transcona was built on immigrants, if I can use that term, from all over the world. A place to get a job and a career and work hard for the community. So we have people from all over the world enjoyed starting lives in Transcona and Canada. And so some who are here today who are from other countries and are living in our community, maybe it's important to them too to understand about where our community came from and why it's such a great place to live and raise your family. So any closing thoughts, Murray? I know
just the fact that interesting to hear the feedback on our first podcast and give us the initiative to carry on.
So that's the end of it. So from me, Peter Martin, thank you for listening, and from
Murray Rougeau, also thank you for listening, and I hope we can cover some of the different subjects that we feel would be important to the new citizens and the old citizens of Transcona.
Till next time, over and out.